So before we get started, biology is the study of life, and all living things share common functions. And one of the things we're going to get into is the structure of the human body. And the human body is made up of trillions of cells, many different types of cells, which again fall under this whole umbrella of biology here. Now, some common functions of all living things is responsiveness. This is the ability to respond to one's environment, both internal and external. So, if you put your hand on a hot stove, you need to respond to that and remove your hand from that hot stove. That would be more of an external stimulus that you're responding to. Internally, when you eat a meal, your blood glucose levels will elevate, and your pancreas will end up secreting insulin to bring blood glucose levels down. That would be an example of responsiveness as well. Growth, this is physical growth of your cells, physical growth of the human body itself, and also, so you can look at this at multiple levels, whether it's just growth of an individual cell or growth of the whole organism as a whole. Reproduction, this is where you have cells that will reproduce to form new cells, but it's also reproduction of the species. Movement, this could be physical movement that we think of where we're physically moving our bodies, but it could also be moving nutrients around the body, and that would occur in the blood, which gets transported throughout the entire body. And then metabolism is the ability to break down nutrients and use those nutrients for energy production so that our cells can survive. So the next couple slides will go over each of these again. I know I briefly went over them, but let's just go look at them individually again. Responsiveness, this is responding to change in the immediate environment. It can also be referred to as irritability. An example of this would be moving away from a painful stimulus, such as when you remove your hand from a hot stove, as I gave that example a few minutes ago. Growth, this is an increase in size of the organism, which is accomplished by growth of cells or the addition of new cells. Complex organisms grow mainly by increasing their number of cells. We then have cellular differentiation. This is the process of individual cells becoming specialized for particular functions. Reproduction, this is the creation of new generations of the same type of organisms. Movement, this may be internal or external. An example of internal, another one from what I gave you, transporting blood, food, or other materials within the body. External will be moving throughout the environment. And in metabolism, this would be the sum of all chemical operations that occur inside the body. Chemical reactions provide energy for the other common functions of living cells, such as the ability to respond, grow, reproduce, and move. Cells use materials absorbed from the environment for energy. This would be the nutrients from food. It's also atmospheric oxygen. A very important molecule that you'll see that is extremely important for not only our cells, but many living cells. Also, more complex organisms require specialized structures and systems for metabolic processes. So what types of metabolic processes exist? We have respiration. This would be the absorption, transport, and use of oxygen by cells. Digestion, this is the breakdown of complex foods into simpler compounds. The reason why we digest these more complex foods down to simpler ones, what we commonly refer to as our macromolecules of carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids, is so that they can be absorbed into the body and used by our cells. Excretion, this is the elimination of waste products that is often generated by undergoing various types of metabolic functions. Okay, so this course is commonly also referred to as anatomy and physiology. The term anatomy literally means cutting open. And in the context of what we're looking at, it's actually looking at the study of internal and external structures. Also, the physical relationships between body parts. And it's divided into gross anatomy and microscopic anatomy. Gross anatomy would be looking at the whole organism as a whole. Microscopic anatomy would be getting into the cellular level or the histology level, which is your tissues level. So gross anatomy is also called macroscopic anatomy, and this is the study of all structures that are visible with the unaided eye or the naked eye. This includes surface anatomy, regional anatomy, and then systemic anatomy. Microscopic anatomy, as I mentioned two terms just a few seconds ago, cystology. This is the study of individual structure of cells. Histology is the study of tissues, which are actually defined by being a group of specialized cells and cell products that work together to perform specific functions. Now, physiology, on the other hand, this is actually going to be the study of function in living organisms. So in other words, how things work, how things get accomplished. An example would be what mechanism is involved in contracting your heart? What's the process that's involved in that? Anatomy gives clues about a likely function. There's a theory that we have in biology that states structure always dictates function. And what that simply means is that structures exist in a particular pattern in order to accomplish a particular function. Now, human physiology is the study of functions of the human body, and there are several subspecialties of human physiology. This could include cell physiology. This is the functions of living cells, which include the chemical and molecular levels. Special physiology. This is the physiology of specific organs. Systemic physiology is the function of specific organ systems. And then pathological physiology, or more commonly referred to as pathology. This is the effects of disease on an organ or an organ system and its functions. Now, when we look at a human body, what we see is our cells. So if you look at yourselves in the mirror, what you're looking at is the entire organism as a whole. And when you look at that, that organism would be what we call the organism or the organismic level. However, there are many smaller components that get us to that particular organism structure. We're actually going to start at the smallest level, and that would be the chemical level. And you are made up of atoms, which are the smallest stable units of matter that exist. And atoms will combine to form molecules. Molecules will then come together to form cells. And that's what we refer to as our second level of organization here, the cellular level. When you have several cells that come together, especially cells that have a different, especially cells that have specific function, and that come together is referred to as a tissue. And then an organ is composed of two or more different tissues that work together to perform specific functions. We then have the organ system level. This consists of organs interacting to perform specific functions. And then we have our organism level, which is where you have several organ systems that all function together. They're intertwined with each other, and they help to keep the overall organism functioning as a whole. And in the human body, we have 11 different organ systems that make up the human organism. So this is just a little cartoon breakdown from your textbook that goes over those different levels of organization. And I believe this is actually a question that's on one of that's on your lecture assignment sheet. So let's look at the 11 organ systems of the human body. And we're going to look at each of these individually. And again, at this point and at this chapter of the course, you just want a brief overview. So pretty much what you see on these slides, and that's about it. because keep in mind, we're going to have a specific chapter on each one of these moving forward. So the first is the integumentary system. This protects against environmental hazards. It helps to control the body temperature and provides sensory information. The integumentary system is going to consist of your hair, skin, and nails. The skeletal system, this provides support, protects tissues, stores minerals such as calcium, and it's also the site of blood cell formation. This includes your red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And the skeletal system consists primarily of your skeleton, which is primarily made up of bones and cartilage. The muscular system, this provides movement, it provides protection and support for other tissues, and it also produces heat. This is going to be composed of a specific type of muscle tissue called skeletal muscles. And you can see those here. This will also include tendons and ligaments. The nervous system, this is one of your two major control systems in the body. This will direct immediate responses to stimuli, usually by coordinating the activities of other organ systems, provides and interprets sensory information about internal and external conditions. This will consist of the brain and spinal cord, which is part of your central nervous system, and then all of your nerves throughout the entire body, which makes up the peripheral nervous system. The endocrine system, this is your second regulatory system. This actually directs long-term changes in activities of other organ systems. And this is going to consist primarily of your endocrine glands, which will secrete hormones, which are chemical messengers that travel throughout the body. The cardiovascular system, this transports cells and dissolved materials, including nutrients, waste products, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. Oxygen and carbon dioxide are referred to as our respiratory gases. And this particular system involves the heart, as well as all of our blood vessels, which would include things like arteries, capillaries, and veins. The lymphatic system, this defends against infection and disease. It returns tissue fluids to the bloodstream, and this will include structures like the spleen, the thymus, and various lymph nodes and lymphatic vessels. The respiratory system, this delivers air to sites in the lungs where gas exchange occurs between the air and bloodstream. This produces sound for communication. And the respiratory system will include your various nose, the pharynx, larynx, trachea, the bronchial tree, and then your lungs, as well as some muscles such as the diaphragm. The digestive system, this processes food and absorbs nutrients into the body. This includes your entire GI tract, which includes the esophagus, stomach, small, large intestines, and anal rectal area, as well as accessory structures such as the pancreas, spleen, and gallbladder. The urinary system, this excretes waste products from the blood. It controls water balance by regulating the volume of urine that's actually produced. And this will include the kidneys, your ureters, your bladder, and finally the urethra. And then finally, we have the reproductive system, male and female reproductive systems. This will either produce the male sex cells, which are sperm and hormones, or produce the female sex cells, the oocytes or eggs, and hormones. It also helps to support the embryonic and fetal development from fertilization to birth. And that is our 11th body system there. Now, one phenomenon that I want to talk about is something called homeostasis. Homeostasis is a state of internal balance or stable internal environment. It must be maintained in order to survive. Malfunction of organ systems when homeostatic responses are overwhelmed will result in illness or disease. So if you cannot maintain that state of internal balance or a stable internal environment, that can actually lead to a disease or, more seriously, some type of illness. This is accomplished by independent cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems that are going to all function together. Now, homeostatic regulation is adjustments in physiological systems that help to preserve homeostasis. And homeostatic regulation usually involves a receptor that senses a particular change or stimulus. So this would be something that is found in the environment that will pick up a particular stimulus, such as pressure, maybe a chemical, maybe light. So it's going to pick up some type of stimulus. The control center or the integration center, this is what's going to receive and process the information from the receptor. And then the effector would be the structure that responds to commands from the control center. This response may oppose or enhance the stimulus. Now, examples of homeostasis outside the body, we have a thermostat that is set as its desired room temperature, and it monitors changes in that temperature. Variations outside the desired range will trigger a response. The thermometer acts as a receptor, detecting changes from the set point and sending information to the thermostat. The thermostat itself acts as the control center. Heater or air conditioner will then act as an effector structure, which will lead to some type of response. Responses oppose or negate the original stimulus, which would fix the overall problem. Now, maintaining homeostasis. There's two mechanisms that are involved in the maintenance of homeostasis. And that would be what we call negative feedback, and the other one you'll see in a second would be positive feedback. Now, the most common situation would be negative feedback. It's the more common form of homeostatic regulation. Variations from normal trigger automatic response. The response corrects the stimulated situation back to its normal range. So for example, if the body temperature is too high, responses that lower the body temperature. If the body temperature is too low, responses that will raise the body temperature, okay? And if you get your body temperature back to where it should be normally, you're not going to be involved in raising it or lowering it anymore, because now it's back to where it should be, which is that homeostatic state. Positive feedback, on the other hand, the response reinforces or exaggerates the original stimulus. This results in an escalating cycle or positive feedback loop. So essentially what happens here is the effect actually just continues to intensify and intensify. And in fact, another event actually has to come back in to actually shut the system down. It's not good enough to say that once you bring yourself back down to normal that it shuts down. An example would be if you've ever seen anybody that's gone through labor and delivered a baby, or asked anybody that's gone through labor, what they will tell you is that the contractions, they start off okay, but then they get more and more and more intense as time passes on, especially the closer you get to delivery, okay? So what happens here is if you, let's say you have a female who just started labor contractions, ultimately what's going to happen? Those contractions are going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and they will continue to move in that direction until some other event kicks in and shuts the whole system down. Now, the event that kicks in to shut this system down is actually birth. The process of actually delivering a baby will stop that process. Okay, so I'm going to end right here for part one of our lecture, which is about halfway through this particular chapter. And what you'll do is you'll see a second recording under chapter one, which will say part two, and we'll pick up with anatomical terminology.